And we're back in the studio like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Tuesday evening here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. A return to a series that I have not revisited in quite some time, most underrated performances. But I'm also going to spotlight a movie which I feel like is also underrated. One of the, if you want to say downsides, one of the downsides about being a filmmaker who has achieved the levels of greatness of Francis Ford Coppola is that unless you make The Godfather 2, The Conversation, Apocalypse Now, unless you do that, everything else just seems like, well, if it weren't Coppola, this would really be great. I reject such petty notions. Francis Coppola's 1997 film, The Rainmaker, yet another adaptation of a John Grisham novel, runaway bestseller, I might add, is a great film, but it is anchored by, in my opinion, the most underrated performance in Matt Damon's career. It makes sense why certain critics, while praising The Rainmaker, didn't give it as much credit as I felt even at the time I saw it in theaters. It didn't get as much acclaim as it should have because it was Coppola. And Matt Damon did not get as much attention for this particular performance because Good Will Hunting was released in the same Oscar season. It was just unfortunate timing for Damon. He wasn't going to get a Best Actor nomination for The Rainmaker, but if you ask me which performance of his do I prefer his his turn as Rudy Baylor in The Rainmaker to his Oscar-nominated, and there were some people that thought he might kind of pull an upset, as Will Hunting in Gus Van Sant's terrific film, Good Will Hunting. But in the case of that movie, the heavy lifting from the acting perspective was done by Robin Williams, who he won the Oscar for supporting actor. But what Matt Damon does in The Rainmaker, and if memory serves, The Rainmaker was shot before Good Will Hunting. To my eyes, Damon looks a little bit slightly younger, and he also looks a little bit smaller. That's what she said. No, but he looks a little bit smaller, as if he hadn't quite, because Matt Damon, we know, is a very athletic guy, and he hasn't really had that much kind of weight fluctuation. He's not a Christian Bale going up 60, down 80, or anything like that. But Matt Damon had lost an enormous amount of weight for Courage Under Fire. And I feel like he was still not quite where he would normally be. He seems, I hate to say it this way too, but he seems healthier physically in Good Will Hunting. In The Rainmaker, he comes across as a guy he's a little underweight there. And if you want to say it works for the character because he's hungry, metaphorically, he's lean and mean and ready to go, okay. But it is something that if you compare Damon's look, because it can't be more than 2 or 3 months apart. We're not talking about a disparity of, oh yeah, they were shot a year apart. He looks like he weighs less, and it's noticeable in The Rainmaker. But what he's able to do, see, the character of Will Hunting is 200 IQ, a genius, the smartest man in the history of the world, and he's also a prodigy at about 50 different things. He can't exist. That is not somebody that can exist in the natural world. It doesn't work. It's impossible. In the world of the film, they sell it, we buy it, movie is fantastic. Rudy Baylor, similar to, well, you probably won't be able to see it, similar to the character of Mike McDermott, who Matt Damon plays in the movie Rounders, which came out the following year, just about a year after The Rainmaker. Rudy Baylor is very intelligent. He's very intelligent within the realm of normal people with high IQs who have exceedingly well-developed problem-solving skills. And he's a young lawyer. I think he went to, well, at the time it was Memphis State University Law. I think that they may have changed the name of it. They could have named it for someone. I don't know. But he is a young attorney who doesn't have much money. He doesn't have much in the way of connections. But he is somebody good work. He wants to do right by his clients, but he's the sort of attorney because there is a fat paycheck on the other side. He wants to actually do meaningful work. And we're not really encouraged to laugh at him. But when we meet the character that John Voight plays in the film, this sort of homespun Southern all charm attorney, whatever gig pays the most, and at a certain point in his professional life, he just kind of gave up on truth and just searching to service the client as much as possible. And the more money they pay, the more likely I am to be completely full of shit at each turn. But Coppola's approach to this, I think, is really solid. And I didn't read the book. My dad read the book. We didn't happen to see this particular film together. He saw it with his lady friend. We saw it the same weekend. Fantastic adaptation of the book. And if you would ask my dear old dad, as I like to say, but for those who don't, to name his favorite Francis Coppola films, he would have had The Rainmaker in the top 3. I don't know the conversation. I think that Dad preferred The Rainmaker to The Conversation. Like, he didn't have any pretense of it as an absolute masterpiece. And it was a really faithful adaptation to his memory of the book. And what I mean by the way that Coppola chose to present it. So you would expect The Rainmaker, of the title, it implies a case that could be a potential windfall for the firm that Rudy Baylor works for, which is J. Lyman Stone Attorneys at Law. That's who he gets with. But to be more specific, before I explain the name of the law firm, in the world of the book, there are multiple cases that Rudy Baylor is working. It might even be more than what we are presented with. But the usual narrative through line for this sort of story, where you have a title, in this case, you have an attorney who is working on a big, potentially huge money case, but something that there is a social conscience element to it. Insurance companies, the era of Luigi Mangione, this movie probably plays a little bit differently now than it did even then, but back then, Danny DeVito gets to deliver the line, there's nothing better than really nailing an insurance company, and that was a laugh line in 1997. But there's a version of The Matrix in which Coppola didn't make this particular film, that he chose to just focus on the Rainmaker of the title, a terrible insurance case where a young man who needed a liver transplant was not allowed to get the liver transplant because the insurance company says, well, the liver transplant won't help. That's not really true. They simply didn't want to pay for it, and they let the young man die. Now, Coppola could have made a movie where the other cases that the Rudy Baylor of John Grisham's book gets involved in are not really there. Or maybe you just get lip service to one of them. You spend 2 minutes, and then you move on, and you just focus on this mom whose son died needlessly and tragically, and that's Rudy Baylor's first big court case. But what Coppola does, by introducing us to a character played by the great old actress, even at the time, Teresa Wright. She was in Pride of the Yankees with Gary Cooper a million years prior. Actually, it would have been 56 years prior. She was so young in Pride of the Yankees with Gary Cooper. But she plays a kind of elderly woman named Miss Birdie. And of the 3 kind of plot lines that we follow, hers is the kind of most lighthearted. And Matt Damon's interactions with Teresa Wright are so good. He never feels like, an actor hamming it up or playing to the crowd because this is like supposed to be a funny old lady. There's not, you could almost have seen Betty White playing this role. But the Miss Birdie storyline is more lighthearted than the rest of the film. And Damon shows the ability here to balance the lighthearted with the serious. And if you want to, from a certain point of view, the most serious of the 3, at least in the moment, because the medical if you want to call it that, or insurance malpractice situation, unfortunately, the young man is already gone. That's too late for any good to occur there. But he gets involved with a young woman played by Claire Danes, who was really a rising star in this era. She had been on the TV show, which is very well remembered by history, but I think it only lasted one season, My So-Called Life, with another future star, future Oscar winner, Jared Leto. Well, in the world of The Rainmaker, Claire Danes plays a young wife, or now I think she's divorced, whose ex-husband is basically, he's a serial domestic abuser. And I think it was played by Andrew Shue. I think it was Andrew Shue. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. But you really don't see him. You just kind of see a shadow and a figure and a blur, almost like horror movie moments when his character appears. And that is all very serious. And I remember the way this movie was promoted. The trailer did something you're also not supposed to do, quote unquote. It sent out a lot of mixed signals. Normally in trailers, you get a through line and you stick to that. And here's the hero, here's the girl, there's a quest or something like that. The hero's stuck in a tree, and how is he going to get himself down, or how is somebody going to help get him down? The trailer for The Rainmaker had all of these different threads running around, and I remember thinking, wow, what the fuck? What is this movie about? But it worked. It made me want to see it perhaps even more, because I could tell just from the trailer, well, the Claire Danes character doesn't seem to be involved in this insurance thing that Danny DeVito was talking about. There's nothing like nailing an insurance company. So it has a novelistic approach. And the movie is, I guess I think it's over 2 hours. It could almost have been a miniseries. But I'm glad that Coppola chose to make the film, because it covers a ton of territory, and it doesn't drag, it doesn't lag, and it doesn't feel like there's no padding here. And the casting is so on point. Even getting Danny Glover to play a kind of sympathetic judge to Matt Damon's cause as Rudy Baylor. And John Voight, who I mentioned even yesterday on the Enemy of the State episode, was just giving so many scenery-chewing masterpiece supporting performances in this era. Anaconda, earlier the same year, 1997 as this. Enemy of the State, he's just way over the line in that movie. And of course, 1996 with Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible as let's just say, a kind of renegade iteration of Jim Phelps. The film is beautifully cast, even down to the CEO of the insurance company. And I remember watching the film, and I didn't know, yes, the internet existed circa fall 1997, but I hadn't read who played the CEO of the insurance company. And the way the movie was building towards the guy running this Great Benefit, that's the name of the company, that he's going to actually make an appearance on the stand. Even at age 23, I was freshly out of film school. I graduated NYU the previous May. I knew that it was going to be a kind of a big actor. I didn't know who it was going to be. It could have been Gene Hackman, but I knew it was going to be an actor of that stature. I remember thinking to myself, it's not going to be Charles Bronson. I figured it would be an older actor who had been a big star. Could it be Dustin Hoffman? Could it be Bobby D or Pacino? No. It ended up being Roy Scheider, 22 years after Jaws. And Roy Scheider, I think, is really good in this film. It's a limited role, and the character is not particularly likable, but he's believable in the kind of flat way that he reads his lines. He seems completely dispassionate from the process of healthcare. And I feel like it was really good casting. And I don't know if Coppola worked on or with any other actors. I'm glad he didn't cast his old buddy from Apocalypse Now, Dennis Hopper. Then it becomes a completely different, don't you fucking look at me. Oh, that would have been great, though, from the high comedy perspective. But the law firm that Rudy Baylor goes to work for, which I briefly mentioned, J. Lyman Stone. J. Lyman Stone is played by Mickey Rourke, a decade after Angel Heart, and at a particular point in history where Mickey's career had dipped. He made a lot of lousy movies after his kind of great run of even films such as 9.5 Weeks, which weren't entirely successful, but he was headlining films in the 80s that at least were difficult to kind of process. They're challenging films, such as Pope of Greenwich Village, Year of the Dragon, Oliver Stone script directed by Michael Cimino, Angel Heart, as I mentioned, A Prayer for the Dying, Barfly, Homeboy, Johnny Handsome, even Desperate Hours with Anthony Hopkins in Hopkins' last role before Silence of the Lambs. But then Mickey's career dipped. he did a film with Samuel Jackson and a still rising Willem Dafoe called White Sands, which it had all the pieces to be a great thriller, but it just didn't ignite. And Samuel L. Jackson was mostly wasted in that film. Not he wasn't drunk, meaning they didn't take advantage of how fiery he can be. He also was on the rise. And then he did a sequel to 9.5 Weeks. That wasn't very good. And he did a movie with Tupac, which Mickey still talks about. I think it's called Bullet on his social media. He and Tupac were pretty close. And, Mickey sometimes writes about him on his Instagram. I still miss this guy. What a great man. Kind of sad because, we see something, a tragedy, and in most cases, somebody who is assassinated, we didn't know them. He knew Tupac. Tupac he considered to be one of his closest friends. He wasn't just, oh yeah, I worked with this guy. They were really tight, and there are pictures of them in clubs in the mid-'90s and stuff like that. But Mickey Rourke, in this movie, he plays Jay Lyman Stone, whose nickname is Bruiser. And I don't know, just the idea of an attorney forgive me, lawyers out there, this is presented as an ambulance chasing kind of a law firm. I don't like that term. I know a lot of lawyers. This is a cliche. It's difficult for me to kind of connect that they're just after the buck. But what we are presented with is that Bruiser, Jay Lyman Stone, he is that kind of attorney. He is cutting corners, and there are certain shifty deals that he has gotten involved in which are not above board. Let's put it that way. Because at a certain point in the film, Bruiser, he just kind of flies the coop, but we don't know where he is. I remember watching the movie, was he dead? Did somebody bump him off? No! He had some sort of prosecution hanging over his... This is an element, I believe, in the book that was a bigger deal. The Bruiser character in the book is more important. We only see Mickey maybe 3 or 4 scenes in the film. But I remember a lot of critics were talking about the fact that if the character had had a little bit more screen time, maybe there could have been a Best Supporting Actor nomination for Mickey because he fucking kills it. And the thing with Mickey is he was able to play older and younger. It really wasn't that difficult for him. Now, he was somebody who just seemed to fit into whatever role he was asked to play like a glove. Year of the Dragon in 1985, he's maybe 30 in real life. I think Mickey was born in 54, and that film came out in 85. I think the character that he plays in that film, Stan White, I think Stan White's supposed to be in his mid-40s. If you didn't know that Mickey Rourke was as young at the time, you wouldn't say, oh yeah, he's not believable as an older person. But the character he's supposed to have gray hair. I guess he's traumatized, but he's definitely playing older. In The Rainmaker, Jay Lyman Stone is for sure supposed to be older than Mickey was in real life. In real life, he would have been like 42 at the time. And he carries it off with such style. This is a guy who is accustomed to living the high life, the good life, but he still seems like somebody who might be at home in the world of Donnie Brasco, knocking the heads off parking meters and collecting the change. Like, this is that sort of guy where he has the blue collar elements while living very, very large. We'll say it that way. And Danny DeVito, another actor who is almost a cheat code, never not great. DeVito, as Bruiser's kind of head paralegal, works with Rudy Baylor throughout. He mostly works with him on the big case, the case against a company called Great Benefit. And DeVito really delivers. And he also gives a great performance. Same time frame. I mean, late 1997, there were so many Oscar contenders which actually were great movies. What a concept. Because if we're big movie fans going back to the 80s, or more so in my case, the 90s when I was really into this, there are a lot of times that Oscar season, you have a shit ton of potential awards contenders. They all flame out. They all fizzle out. But in this instance, in a different year, The Rainmaker, I think, would have gotten more Oscar nominations. I don't know if it even got any, which is a little bit kind of crazy. But DeVito was nominated, I think, for L.A. Confidential. I think he was nominated for L.A. Confidential. I know that that got a lot of awards nominations. And was Spacey up for supporting also? I think that film had 2 Best Supporting Actor nominations. Hell, you could have nominated James Cromwell. Man, he killed that role, no pun intended. But Matt's earnestness, the fact that he is delivering lines that in the hands of a different actor, we would be mocking him. We would be laughing at him because he has the old school integrity. That it doesn't feel like this is taking place in the 90s. He has the kind of Atticus Finch earnestness that he really believes what he's doing. And there is a part of him that is disappointed by John Voight's character, the Southern attorney. It's funny that I can't remember his name. He's disappointed because he sees this guy as something that he himself probably could turn into. And it almost hurts Rudy to know that at a certain point in this individual's life, he was probably a great attorney who had a nose for the truth and wasn't afraid to uncover it, even if it meant my client might not get exactly what they're asking for. But I'm not just going to service my client. I'm going to follow the truth. And we're going to try to get to the bottom of what happened here. And there is a moment in this film where Rudy Baylor is at the end of his rope and he just can't stand Voight, what he's doing, and the way that he's grandstanding. And just the way he looks at him, it gives him a 1,000-yard stare and says, "Do you even remember the first time you sold out?" And he says it with such anger and such vitriol in his voice. In the hands of a different actor, it might be a laugh line. But we believe Rudy Baylor. He is almost hurt by what this guy is. And we know for sure, I don't want to become like him. I'm going to do better. I am going to stick to the light. I am not going to turn to the dark side. A little bit of a Star Wars kind of thing. Now, Oliver Stone, speaking of Oliver Stone, in the movie Platoon, that's what you would call a little bit on the nose, where you have the character of Elias, Willem Dafoe, and then you have the character of Barnes, Tom Berenger, and we're supposed to believe they're the two sides of Charlie Sheen's soul. Are we going to follow the light? That would be Elias. Or are we going to go dark? Barnes. Well, in the world of this film, we only have Voight. And we know Rudy Baylor is not going to, he's not going to go heel. Like, there's not going to be a heel turn. This isn't going to be wrestling. He's not going to kick anybody in the balls. He is just going to be, he's going to continue to try to service his clients as well as possible. And the idea of kind of gray area, the Firm gets into that. The Firm, I guess, was a little over 4 years prior. That's also an adaptation of a Grisham book. Not surprisingly, John Grisham was a lawyer. Most of his books, Pelican Brief, like I say, The Rainmaker, Runaway Jury, Time to Kill, they deal with the law in one form or another. In a world of the movie, there's not enough, I shouldn't say that, there's not quite as much, because in the book, spoiler alert, Mitch McDear basically takes the money and runs. He's not doing lawful things. He just basically amscrays and let's get the fuck out of Dodge here. Whereas in the movie, he continues to try to behave in a manner that is above board. A lot of people didn't like the ending. They thought that they should have stuck with the kind of ballsy ending that Grisham had come up with, the take the money and run ending, and they went with a more conventional, no, I'm just going to keep trying to be the best attorney for my clients that I could. But Rudy Baylor is the sort of protagonist that I think you need for this kind of film. The cases that he is involved in, you need somebody who is just trying to get to the heart of the matter, to get to the truth. And in this instance, he knows that Great Benefit has screwed this family over. It's just a question of, can we prove it to the satisfaction of the jury? And, you hate to say it, but when somebody's gone, there isn't enough money in the world. You can't bring them back. But you have to do something. You have to strike some kind of a blow against this sort of fuckery where they knew damn well that the liver transplant was it was most likely the only way that the kid wasn't going to die, and they just let him die. Something must be done. Attention must be paid, as they say. And so, Coppola, unfortunately, he was coming off the movie Jack, which was the previous year, and that's a movie that I think is slightly underrated. It was trashed by almost every major critic. Siskel and Ebert hated it. What an incredible cast. That's the film where Robin Williams plays a child with progeria or something like it, where by the time he's 10, he looks like he's 40. And he's aging at about 4 times the rate that he should. Bill Cosby was in it, very young Jennifer Lopez, was it Brian Kerwin, Diane Lane. Really a fantastic cast. Film wasn't great. This was an enormous step up. And yes, there were critics, and you could find this if you Google, that were saying, thank goodness, a welcome return to form for Francis Coppola after the debacle of Jack. I don't think it's really a debacle. It's just not that good. It wasn't worthy of Coppola's talents. And it's, you set the bar that high, people have expectations that are insane. And if The Rainmaker had been the exact same film, but had been directed by a first-time filmmaker, guaranteed it would have gotten more acclaim. But Coppola's command of the form, the way that he chooses to stage some of the courtroom scenes, the angles, he was working on every shot. You can tell he didn't do anything by chance. He planned everything out, and I think this film is a notch below masterpiece. It's a 9 out of 10, and Damon's performance never wavers, never lags, and I'm a big fan of Matt Damon, and not just because of Rounders. I think the guy is terrific. He's been good in almost every film, even a movie I didn't really like Downsizing. It's the only film of Alexander Payne's that, he's just a phenomenal filmmaker. But Damon in that film is fantastic. Even if I don't like the movie, he's great. And then another film that he was in where it's not really a performance movie, the one about the viral outbreak in 2011 where Gwyneth Paltrow plays his wife, Lawrence Fishburne. Strange, I can't remember the name of that movie. But he's really good in that film in almost entirely thankless role. And he's a guy who was somehow immune or he doesn't get sick, and then it kind of goes from there. That's a good movie. That's not a great movie. Not as great as The Rainmaker. If I had to rank 5 favorite Matt Damon performances, we're going to go Rainmaker, Good Will Hunting, Rounders. I like what he does in Legend of Bagger Vance. I know that's a film a lot of people didn't appreciate at the time, but I feel like time has been kind to it. It's also the last film that Jack Lemmon ever appeared in, and I like his performance there. He was still feeling well enough to give a real Jack Lemmon kind of a performance. But so I guess you could say Courage Under Fire. You could go with Saving Private Ryan. A lot of people would say Talented Mr. Ripley. He was nominated for Best Actor for that. But Damon's just been so good across so many different kinds of movies. Departed, I'm sorry, I'm not a huge fan of that. It's the weakest Scorsese film that I've seen. Let me point out, that's high praise because Scorsese's never missed. A 3 to 3.5 star movie is a lesser work for Martin Scorsese. But just in case you're wondering, I think Bringing Out the Dead is a better movie than The Departed. That's my hot take for the day. A lot of people didn't love that film. It's a difficult movie to sit through at times. It's very disturbing. But wow, an incredible fever dream. But yeah, The Rainmaker. But Matt Damon's performance as Rudy Baylor in particular. The newest entry in our continuing series of most underrated performances. The Rainmaker from 1997, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, starring Matt Damon, Jon Voight, Claire Danes, Danny Glover, Virginia Madsen in a cameo, and Roy Scheider in a little bit more than just a cameo. This has been episode 465 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Tuesday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.